This is the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 17. We're looking at the squads of the 2023 Gold Cup. This is the full-length version for Qatar's players. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin and this is Series 17 on the players of the 2023 Gold Cup, and this episode covers Qatar's players. Just a couple of notes before we begin. This media cast, we've combined the two parts that we did in our World Cup coverage. So in the World Cup coverage, we did one podcast on kind of predicting the candidates, and then when the rosters came out, the final squad list, we did another one kind of updating it and saying who had made it. In this case, we're going to do both in one. So I'm recording the first part in May, and then we expect the rosters to come out in June. So we'll kind of tag that on at the end. So the first part is kind of our prediction of or kind of a list of all the possible candidates on our prediction of how likely they are. And the second part, probably the second third, will be who actually made it to the squad. So that'll let you know both the candidates and who did make the team. So we gave quite a bit of biographical information in that World Cup one, which we did for Qatar. So we're not going to do as much background information on the players here. We're going to give key information and their recent participation. So if you want the bit of a deeper dive into Qatar's players, we recommend going back to the World Cup player media cast for that one. All right, so once again, we're organizing this by position. And once again, I'll caveat by saying we do realize that it's not always accurate. Players do move around and change position. And there's always a few surprises, so we'll cover them as best we can in the second part of the show when we know the selections. All right, well, let's begin by looking at the games Qatar has played recently. So we have them. The three World Cup games is where we'll start, and they had four Arabian Gulf Cup games, and then one kind of odd friendly that they played. So obviously we know what their A team was from the World Cup squad, and I can handle this quickly by saying they went with a pretty defensive 5-3-2 formation in all three games there against Ecuador, Senegal, and the Netherlands. So five at the back, and unfortunately, it didn't work out for Qatar that well. It's not that they lost all games, because they are a fairly small team on the world scale, but they really didn't live up to the potential, especially the potential that they showed in the 2019 African Cup. So I felt quite sad about that. But they have to move forward, and they had the Arabian Gulf Cup. I think that used to be called the Gulf Cup of Nations, but the Arabian Gulf Cup, obviously what it's called now, and that was staged in Iraq in late January. And Qatar had three group stage games, and they made it to the quarterfinals where they lost to the host Iraq. And I'll just say that it was a bit odd, the selections made for that. They didn't seem to bring their very best players, and yet they did bring quite a few of their A-team players, but not the top players. So not sure what was going on there under the new manager. Perhaps they realized that the A players, players like Afif and Almoez Ali, are going to be on the team anyway, and wanted to try out some other players. But I was a bit confused, because there are some players, some of the top players are kind of in their 30s now. So I don't know if that means they're still on the squad or kind of moving off the squad. But we'll have to, we got a hint of that a bit later, but I'll just finish with the lineups for the Arabian Gulf Cup here. So they started with a 4-2-3-1 formation, so a bit more of an attacking formation. And that was in their first game against Kuwait, which they won 2-0. And then for the second game and third game against Bahrain and UAE, respectively, they went with a 4-3-3 formation. However, they lost 2-1 to Bahrain and tied UAE 1-1. So a bit all over the place in that tournament, really. Bahrain probably the weakest team there, but the team they lost to. And then in Iraq, or against Iraq in the quarterfinals, they went back to a 4-2-3-1 formation. So, but lost 2-1. Okay, so the like the 5-3-2 in the World Cup, the 4-2-3-1 is a bit more attacking, but nevertheless more defensive than the 4-3-3 formation that they used against Bahrain and UAE. So there we have it. And finally, they had a bit of an odd little friendly with Croatia. I'm just looking to see where that game was played. That was in Austria. It's kind of an international stadium, Wiener Neustadt in Austria, where a lot of international games between two countries that are not Austria are being played, and that's where this one was played. But it was Croatia's B squad, and they lost 1-0. And in that one, went with the 4-3-3 formation too. So that's a bit interesting, that one, because some of the players who didn't play in the Gold Cup, some of the A players came back for that game. So we know that those players are still on the team, and yet a few of them didn't, leaving us in a bit of doubt as to where especially some of the players in their 30s stand. But we'll mention that as we go through, and we're going to start with the manager. And then the biggest change, the biggest news coming out of Qatar is the release of longtime manager Felix Sanchez Bass. Felix Sanchez is how he's usually called. And he was basically tasked with preparing the Qatar team for the World Cup, and had been with Qatar all the way back since 2008, really. He was at the Aspire Academy in Qatar from 2008, and coached the Qatar national team from 2017 to 2022, including coaching the Qatar under-23 national team for the first part of that period. So I guess, you know, of course they were disappointed with the result, and he is no longer manager of the team. In fact, he's moved on to become the manager of Ecuador, quite interestingly, the team they lost to in the first game of the cup there. Coming in is a manager of great renown, Carlos Queiroz. Carlos Queiroz has coached so many national teams. He coached South Africa in the 2002 World Cup qualification, didn't actually take them to the tournament. He was manager of Portugal, Iran a couple of times, Colombia, Egypt, and now the manager of Qatar. I must say he made a bad impression on me in the 2021 African Cup against Egypt, where his behavior was pretty disgraceful. But a big change, Felix Sanchez being a kind of a very mild-mannered, calm coach, and Carlos Queiroz being pretty dramatic and vocal. So a big change going forward, and that probably means some changes to the squad. So going back to those older 18 players, perhaps he is kind of clearing house a little bit here and bringing in a younger squad. But we'll see as we go through the players. Okay, let's move on to goalkeepers. So we have one definite candidate in Michiel Barsham. So Michiel Barsham is 25 years old and has 24 caps, so he's played quite a bit. Only been with the team since 2020, so played quite a bit recently. And he was part of their Gold Cup squad, the starting keeper in the 2021 Gold Cup. And he was actually the backup keeper in the World Cup, but he gained the starting position in that cup. So I just want to make a little note on my file there. And he started all 5 of their games since the 2022 World Cup. So he was a starter in the Arab Cup. So he definitely looks like he's going to be the starter in the Gold Cup too. Okay, he replaces the starter in the World Cup, who is Saad Al-Sheeb, but we only have him as a possible candidate here because he hasn't appeared since the World Cup, and as mentioned, he was replaced as a starting keeper in the World Cup. And Saad Al-Sheeb is 33 years old. So again, maybe one of those A-team players, perhaps being kind of cleared out and making room for younger players. He's been with the team since 2009 and has 84 caps. And I won't mention the clubs actually for Qatar because all of them play in Qatar, and there's only there's only a handful of clubs that they play for, and I don't think it's that relevant to our discussion. You know, Al Duhai, Al Saad, Al Gharafa, Al Arabi, just probably like 6 or 7 clubs that they all play for. So I'll skip that bit of information. So Saad Al-Sheeb has been with the team since the Asian Cup in 2011, and he was actually the backup keeper for the Gold Cup in 2021. So he was there, but playing backup, but was a starting keeper in 2022. So after game 1, he was replaced by Michel Barcham. So we have him as as a possible candidate here, possibly making his way off the team because he hasn't appeared since the World Cup. Also, as a possible candidate, we have Yusuf Hassan or Yusuf Hassan Ali. So Yusuf Hassan Ali is 27 years old. And he's been with Qatar since 2018 and has just 9 caps. Obviously, difficult to get in ahead of the 2 players we mentioned there. But he has been around for a while, ever since the 2019 Asian Cup, where he was a backup keeper, and in all the competitions since then. That includes the 2019 Copa America, but we won't talk too much about that one. But we'll focus on the 2 most recent tournaments, the 2021 Gold Cup and the 2022 World Cup, where he was a backup keeper in both. He didn't play in the Gulf Cup in January, but did appear on the bench in that friendly against Croatia. So we know he's still on the team and a possible candidate here. And then we have 2 candidates who are possible but unlikely. So the first one is Mahmoud Abu Nada, and he doesn't have any caps for Qatar, and he's 23 years old and has never played in a tournament. But he returned after a 16-month absence from the squad to play in play in the Gulf Cup there, but he was on the bench then, and he wasn't selected for the friendly in June. The other one is Shehab El-Ethi, and he also has no caps and was also born in 2000, so he's 23 years old. Also has not been a part of any squad so far, but was, again, on the bench for the Gulf Cup, but not for the Cup in June, so not likely to make the squad, we think. And finally, we'll just quickly mention a player who I don't think will be on the squad, but Yusuf Balade, and he was on the preliminary roster for the Gulf Cup. Okay, so they'll bring 3 keepers to the Cup there, so obviously, it could be the first 3. Anyway, that'll be in the second part of the podcast. We will know who is selected. Moving on to defense now. We begin with central defenders, and we have a couple of definite candidates. The first one, Tariq Salman. Tariq Salman has been with Qatar since 2017, and he has 63 caps and no goals actually, and is 25 years old and a real veteran of the team, 63 caps. And he started all 5 of their games since the 2022 World Cup. So he was involved in the Arab Cup. And he was also a starter in the Gold Cup. Actually, no, he wasn't. He was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup and 2019 Copa America, but not in the Gold Cup or the World Cup. He was just a sub in the recent World Cup. So, and nevertheless, we consider him a definite candidate. The next one is Bassam Hisham Al Rawi. So Bassam Al Rawi as a definite candidate, and excuse me, he's been with Qatar since 2017, just like Tariq Salman, and has 59 caps and 2 goals, so a couple of more goals there. And he's also reasonably young. He's 25 years old, and he didn't play in the Gulf Cup in January, but he did start in their friendly in June. So again, we know he's still on the team, and he's always been a starter over the last several cups, including the 2021 Gold Cup and the 2022 World Cup. However, he did lose his position in the 2022 World Cup. He wasn't even on the bench for games 2 and 3. So I actually searched for the reason for that. Was he injured or something like that? But I didn't get any information on that. In fact, he's not listed as injured, as having been injured for those games. So Lord knows what happened there. I'm just taking a quick look to see if I can find any information on it, because I'm pretty sure he wasn't listed as injured. And yeah, just listed as not being on the squad. So a bit strange there. But again, returned in June and is a real stalwart on the team. So I think he will be part of the Gold Cup squad. We have him as a definite candidate. And next we have a likely candidate in Jassim Gabber. So Jassim Gabber is really new to the team. He got his first cap in 2023 and is just 21 years old. And he has 4 caps. So he played in the Arab Cup, and he subbed in during the friendly in June too. In June also, I'll make it clear. And he was part of the World Cup squad in 2022, but he didn't see any action there, just on the bench there. So kind of coming into the system, but used recently. Now, one of the players we're a bit unsure about is Boualam Kouki. So we have him as a possible candidate, even though he's kind of a stalwart over the last few tournaments. I'll give the biographical information on him. He's been with the team since 2013 and has 108 caps and 21 goals. But he is 32 years old, so getting a bit older. He's actually born in Algeria, and he's been part of tournaments since 2015, consistently a starter in all tournaments, including the 2021 Gold Cup and the 2022 World Cup. However, that was the last time he appeared for the team, so not part of the Gulf Cup and not part of the friendly in June, and that's why we have to bump him down to just a possible candidate here. Not sure what his status is with the team. Okay, finally, we have a player in the possible but unlikely category. So Mohamed Ahmad, or Mohamed Ahmad Ayash. And he has joined the team in 2022 and has just 1 cap there. And is 22 years old. So I may be butchering his name and several of these names, but I said Ayash, but I think it's actually Aish. Okay, so just 1 cap for him and has never taken part in any tournament, but he was on the bench for all 4 of the games in the Arab Gulf Cup there, but he wasn't part of the June squad. So we have him as a possible candidate, but unlikely. All right, we move on to left backs, where we have a definite candidate in Homam Ahmed. I'm sorry, Arabic people. I try my best, but The names are sometimes tricky, but I'm doing my best. Okay, Homam Ahmed is I don't know why I'm particularly having trouble with that one. Anyway, he has been with the team since 2019, and he has 38 caps and 2 goals, and is 23 years old. So he joined Qatar for the 2021 Gold Cup, where he started all 5 games and also started all games in the 2022 World Cup. So he seems their default left back. He also played in the Arab Cup there, the Gulf Cup in January, and he was subbed in for the other. So we think he's become a firm part of the team and will be at the Gold Cup, a definite candidate in Homam Ahmed. Next, we have a possible candidate in Abdel Karim Hassan, or Abdel Karim Hassan Fadlallah, a possible candidate. He has been with the team a long time, since 2010, and has 121 caps, so a very experienced player, and he's only 29 years old. In addition to 121 caps, he's got 15 goals. And he was the 2018 Asian Player of the Year. But he got in trouble, actually, due to a social media posting during the World Cup. So he was handed an indefinite suspension. And so his status is very unclear. Actually, I haven't seen that he is still under suspension. I'll just check it out while I'm talking here. It hasn't actually, maybe the suspension was lifted or something, because it doesn't mention it in the sources that I use, but I read an article about him being suspended. Oh yes, yeah, my source doesn't cover that, so it actually might be the case. Anyway, of course, with those caps, you can tell he's a real veteran. He's been part of the team since the 2015 Asian Cup, and he was a starter in the 2021 Gold Cup and in the World Cup. But he hasn't appeared for the national team since the World Cup. So perhaps under suspension there. I'll maybe make a little note for myself to try and get more information on that for the second part of the podcast or MediaCast. Okay, finally, we have another possible candidate in Hazem Ahmed Shehata. So Hazem Ahmed Shehata is new to the team since 2023. He has 2 caps and no goals. And he is 25 years old. He has not been a part of any tournament, but actually he did get his first cap in 2017, and then was off the team and came back more than 4 years later. And then was off the team again. So after a 10-month absence, that was his second absence, he came back for the Gulf Cup in January 2023, where he started one of the games and was subbed in for one, and then on the bench. So Hazem Ahmed Shehata, probably we would move him up to likely if Abdel Karim Hassan is indeed suspended. Okay, that is left back, so just 3 candidates there. And at right back, well, the stalwart player for a long time has been Pedro Miguel, who is sometimes called Roro, but we have to put him as a possible candidate here because he's another of the players who hasn't shown up since the Gold Cup, since the World Cup. He's 32 years old. So again, I'm kind of wondering if maybe these players in their 30s are being cleared off the team, but we'll have to wait and see. Pedro Miguel has actually only been with the team since 2016. So that would put him as 26 when he arrived on the Qatar team. But he nevertheless has 85 caps and 1 goal because he's been the standard right back for a long time. I do see him drifting to a centre-back position more in recent times. Anyway, ever since the 2019 Asian Cup, he's been a starter for the squad, including the 2021 Gold Cup and the 2022 World Cup. But as mentioned, that was the last time he appeared for the team, so his status a little bit up in the air. We have another possible candidate in Mosab Kadir. Mosab Kadir has been with the team since 2017, and he has 32 caps, and he is 30 years old. He, again, fairly late in joining the squad there, and in terms of tournaments, his first tournament was the 2021 Gold Cup. But he was on that squad and the World Cup squad, although he only appeared very briefly in both, subbing in the last few minutes of one game. So hasn't really made an impression in tournaments. However, he did play in the Gulf Cup in January, and oh no, I'm sorry, he did not play in the Gulf Cup in January, but he did sub into that friendly in June. So we do know he's still on the squad. Finally, we have one kind of possible but unlikely candidate in Diab Taha. So Diab Taha doesn't have any caps for the team and is just 22 years old. He didn't start any of the games in the Gulf Cup, but he was on the roster, and he was on the bench for 4 games, but not called up in for the June game. So we doubt he's going to be part of the squad. But given the kind of up in the air nature of Pedro Miguel, that could be his way into the team. Okay, well, we move on to midfielders, and we begin with defensive midfielders. And there we have another veteran in Karim Budayev. And however, we have to put him at the possible level for similar reasons we've talked about of other players that are 32 years old. So he's been with Qatar since 2013 and is a real veteran with 118 caps and 6 goals. His first tournament was the 2015 Asian Cup, and he's been a starter in tournaments ever since. Actually, the 2019 Copa America, he was a substitute. But he did finish game 3 there. Otherwise, a starter for the team. However, he has not appeared since the 2022 World Cup. So I think that's the third candidate we have in their 30s who hasn't shown up since the World Cup. So we have to put his status as just possible, even though he has been a real stalwart on the team. Another possible candidate is Salam Al-Hajri. So Salam Al-Hajri has been with the team since 2017 and has 25 caps, no goals, so he's truly a defensive midfielder, and is 27 years old. And he's been, tournament-wise, been there since the 2019 Asian Cup. However, he didn't make the final cut for the 2021 Gold Cup, and even in the Copa America before that, actually for all tournaments, he's really been just a sub. And in the 2022 World Cup, he was just on the bench the whole time. So usually kind of on the squad, but has trouble getting onto the field. In terms of the recent Gulf Cup, he was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2 of those games. And but as I say, usually kind of makes the roster. So we have him as a possible candidate. Finally, we have at the possible but unlikely level is Ahmed Fadel, or Ahmed Fadel Hasaba. And he is new to the team since 2022. Even though he is 30 years old, he just has 3 caps there, and I'm trying to find out his age here. Okay, well, he's 30 years old, or perhaps 29 years old. That's why I have to search on the thing, because I have their year of birth, but it's June now, so it's kind of 50-50 whether they're one age or the other. So as I'm kind of talking, I'm looking at a website and frantically trying to find their name so I can actually give their actual age. Anyway, Ahmed Fadel Hassaba he was actually on a 30-man training squad for the World Cup squad, but he didn't make the final cut. But he was selected for the Gulf Cup in January this year, and was subbed into two and on the bench for two others. But then he was not called up for the June game. So possible but unlikely is Ahmed Fadel Hassaba. All right, we move on to the central midfield, where we meet a couple of other veterans. And I see I have a player in the wrong place here, so I got to kind of hurry and put them in the right place. Okay, central midfielders. We have Asim Madibo. And Asim Madibo has 50 caps since 2017. No goals, though, so more of a defensive midfielder. And he is 28 years old. And he's been with the team since the 2019 Asian Cup. He was a starter in that tournament and in the Copa America in 2019, but kind of has moved down to a sub position in 2021 Gold Cup. He was a substitute. In the World Cup, he was on the bench for game one, but then gained a starting position for the next two games. But nevertheless, an experienced player on the team, and he was called up for the Gulf Cup in January and started all four of their games there, and started in the June friendly against Croatia's B team. So we have him. Whoops, I didn't even put his name on the list that I'm running for YouTube watchers. So there we have Asim Madibo, a definite candidate. Also definite is Mohamed Wad, or Mohamed Wad Al-Bayati, but I'm pretty sure I've heard him being called Mohamed Wad. So he has been with the team since 2020, so relatively new to the team, but has earned 29 caps in that time, and he has no goals. 23 years old, and his first tournament was the 2021 Gold Cup, where he appeared only briefly in game one, where he was subbed in injury time. He was also a sub in the 2022 World Cup, but at least he got a few more minutes in there, 20 in one game and about 10 in the other. So he started all 4 of their games in the Gulf Cup. And he was also involved in the friendly against Croatia. I just know he started 4 games and subbed into 1. I didn't actually write down which game he had subbed into. But anyway, a definite candidate, because he's been named to the 2 squads there and called up ever since. So, yeah, maybe definite is a bit generous, but we'll stick with it, because we have a likely candidate in Ali Asadallah, or Ali Asadallah Kambar. So Ali Asadallah Kambar has been with the team since 2013, and he had 66 caps and 12 goals, and he is 30 years old. He could be 29. I have to start writing that on the thing. Anyway, he appeared way back in the 2015 Asian Cup, but then was not selected again all the way until the 2022 World Cup. So he was part of the recent World Cup squad, but he only appeared in 1 game there as a sub. He was subbed in 64 minutes into game 3. And he was selected for the Gulf Cup squad in January and started most of their games there. So Ali Asada, a likely candidate here. And finally, among central midfielders, we have Mustafa Tarek Mashal. So Mustafa Tarek Mashal has been with the team since 2022. and he has 3 caps, just 22 years old, and he started one of their 5 games since the World Cup, so part of the Gulf Cup squad. Part of the Gulf Cup squad, but just started 1 game and subbed in for 2 games there. So a possible candidate. Okay, we move on to left midfielders, and we have Abdulaziz Hatem, or Abdulaziz Hatem Abdullah. So he's a real veteran with the team since 2009, and he has 107 caps and 11 goals, and he is 32 years old. So we know the fate of 32 years old players by now. He has not appeared since the 2022 World Cup. That's why we have to put him, not at the definite category, but at the possible category. But veteran that he is, he's been with the team since the 2015 Asian Cup, and generally a starter, but doesn't start all of the games. And that was true in the 2022 World Cup, where he started games 1 and 3, but was just a sub in game 2 there. But another player who hasn't appeared since the 2022 World Cup. So honestly, we don't know his status, and we won't know until they publish their final roster. Actually, I think they have a couple of friendlies before the Gold Cup, but we won't be able to update on that. We'll just be looking at the final roster. Okay, we have one more left midfielder at the possible but unlikely level in Abdel Rahman Mustafa. So Abdel Rahman Mustafa has been with Qatar since 2018, but only has 5 caps in that time, and he's 26 years old. So struggling to get into the team. He was part of the 2019 Asian Cup squad, just on the bench there, but he hasn't been selected for any of the 3 cups since then. And he actually last appeared for the team in November 2022, so that was before the World Cup. So he has been in and around, but hasn't been selected for squad. So we consider him unlikely here. Again, of course, unless a lot of the players who are kind of up in the air don't come, then these players who are possible but unlikely may move up to the possible category. Okay, for right midfielders, we don't have any candidates. So it'll probably be a right back, or more likely a right winger, because they have a lot of right wingers filling that role. I'm just looking at the World Cup and seeing that it was Abdulaziz Hatem. On the right wing, it was Hassan Al Haidos, and they were kind of choosing different players for that role. So Karim Boudaif in game 1 against Ecuador. Anyway, we'll skip right wingers because nobody is coded that way, and move on to left wingers. Sorry, I might have said right wingers there. We do have right wingers, but no right midfielders. Left wingers, we have a likely candidate in Khalid Munir Mazid. Khalid Munir Mazid is 25 years old, and he joined the team a bit late, since 2021. So he only has 7 caps and 1 goal, and he didn't make the final cut for the 2021 Gold Cup squad, but he was on the roster for the World Cup, although he was sitting on the bench and saw no action. However, he did start 3 of their games, 3 of their 5 games since the Gold Cup, and subbed in for the other 2. So called up for both the Gold Cup and the friendly in June. So we have him, Khalid Munir, as a likely candidate. As a possible candidate, we have Ismail Mohammed. So Ismail Mohammed has been with the team since 2013 and is a veteran with 77 caps. He is 33 years old. 77 caps and 4 goals. So he's 33 years old. And actually, despite all of those caps, he's had difficulty getting a foothold as a starter at least. He was part of the Asian Cup squad in 2015, but didn't make the squad for the 2019 Asia Cup or the 2019 Copa America. And for the 2021 Gold Cup, he was on the roster but on the bench. And in the World Cup also started on the bench but gained a starting position after that. So perhaps finally working his way into the squad at 33 years old. But unlike the other players in their 30s, he was called up for the Gulf Cup and he started 4 of their 5 games. And he wasn't selected for the June game. So again, it seemed to be kind of the top players who are in their 30s that are really under question here, and I wouldn't put him in the same category as some of the other veterans who are always starters. Anyway, nevertheless, Ismail Mohammed is a possible candidate here, and we move on to right wingers where we have 3 possible candidates, and the first, actually these are in no particular order. The first is Naif Al-Hadrami. Naif Al-Hadrami has just been with the team since 2022, and he has 1 cap. One cap. He's 21 years old, so one of the players kind of coming into the system, and he was on the roster for the 2022 World Cup. He was on the preliminary squad for the 2021 Gold Cup. That was a 60-player preliminary squad, so they pretty much named everyone, everyone involved with soccer in any way, and a lot of them didn't make the final cut. But he was on the squad for the 2022 World Cup, but on the bench the whole time. And then in the Gulf Cup in January, he was on the squad, but also on the bench there and not selected for the June game. So we consider him just a possible candidate, but given the lack of players on the right side, he may have a better chance than it seems. Secondly, we have Amro Surak. So Amro Surak has been with the team since 2023, and he has 4 caps and 2 goals. So I think he has a bit of a better chance than Al-Hadrami. Actually, I'm going to kind of move him up on the list here because of that. And maybe I shouldn't do that, because unlike Hadrami, he wasn't on the squad for the 2022 World Cup. In fact, he had been off the team. He was named to the preliminary squad for the 2021 Gold Cup, but didn't actually play any games until his first cap in January of this year. And then he was a starter in the Gulf Cup, starting all 4 games. But not selected for the June friendly. So Amro Surak, a possible candidate. And finally, we have Al Abdullah Tamim. And he is also new to the team since 2023 with 4 caps and 1 goal. And he is 20 years old, so very young players we're talking about here. And he hasn't been involved in any previous cups. His first cap was in January of this year, and that was his first appearance in my files. And he started 2 of their remaining 5 games and subbed in for 3. So he was included in the June game. So all 3 of these players, Naif Al-Hadrami, Amro Surak, and Al Abdullah Tamim, all kind of have a bit of a claim for making the squad for the Gold Cup here. And as I say, I think they're going to need at least one of them because they're a bit weak on the right side. Finally, we have one possible but unlikely candidate in Hashim Ali. So Hashim Ali has been with the team since 2018. But in that time, he's only amassed 5 caps. But he is just 22 years old. And he has been kind of around since 2018, as I said. But he hasn't made any tournament yet. And he was on the preliminary squad for the 2021 Gold Cup. Doesn't seem to even have been a consideration in 2022 because he had been off the squad. So he returned after a 19-month absence. That's almost 2 years in January 2023. To the Gulf Cup there, where he was subbed in for 3 games and on the bench for 1, but not selected for the June game. Okay, and then finally we have a couple of general midfielders. So these are not players that kind of play all over the field. We usually handle that at the beginning of the midfielder section. These are players that are so new that their role hasn't really been defined. So we have 2 candidates, Abdullah Al-Yazidi and Faisal Azadi. And we'll just pretty much leave it at their names here. They were both selected for the preliminary squad of the Gulf Cup there. And that's the only involvement they've had. I'm just going to take a sip of water here. Because I'm talking at a mile a minute. I'm back. Okay, well, some people might disagree with me putting Akram Afif as an attacking midfielder, but he's our first candidate and only at the likely level. So Akram Afif is actually coded as a forward. I've also seen him coded as a left midfielder, but in my mind, I generally see him as an attacking midfielder, kind of tending towards the left side. Akram Afif, one of their best players, a great player to watch. He's been with Qatar since 2015. And he has 94 caps and 26 goals. Also a big assister of goals too, although I don't have stats on that. But 26 years old, so still quite young, and but very experienced. He was, one of the great players in the 2019 Asian Cup, and he's been involved in all the tournaments since as a starter, including the 2022 World Cup. However, he has not appeared for the national team since the 2022 World Cup, but he's not in his 30s. I can't imagine them not using him in this Gold Cup. So we've been putting most players who haven't appeared since the World Cup as as possible, but in Akram Afif's case, we got to say likely. It would be shocking if they didn't use him. At the portable level is the captain, Hassan Al-Haidos. So he has been with the team since 2008, and he has 169 caps. That's, that puts him in a rare category of players beyond 150 caps. And he's 32 years old, 169 caps and 37 goals. 32 years old, but another of the players who hasn't appeared since the World Cup, and in his case, a concern. He did look a bit slow in the World Cup, I must say, and he was subbed out of each game. In the past, he was rarely subbed out of games. So, yeah, I think his age catching up with him a bit. But he's been with Qatar since the Asian Cup in 2011, and has been a real stalwart player for them. But he's one of the ones I wonder that will maybe move on because of age, or be moved out of the team because of age. I hope I'm not insulting him there, but again, all those players in their 30s not being selected by Carlos Queiroz since the World Cup. And then we have one candidate who seems to be off the squad. He last appeared for the national team in March 2022, so more than a year ago, and that's Abdullah Al-Arak. But he was with the team since 2017 and has 28 caps and 1 goal. And he's not, he's not kind of aging out. He is 26 years old, and but never really got a foothold onto the squad. He was in the Copa America 2019 and 2021 Gold Cup squads, but he wasn't a starter in those. And then he wasn't selected even for the preliminary squad for the 2022 World Cup. So he may make a comeback, but there's no sign of that yet. We don't have any secondary strikers. or at least players coded as secondary strikers, although we could view Akram Afif that way. So we move on to forwards, our last category, where we start with the great Almoez Ali, or Almoez Ali Abdullah. Wow, if you had seen him in the Asian Cup 2019, you'll know why I'm sad that they didn't really show their stuff in the World Cup, because he was a phenomenal player in the Asian Cup there, and then has been a starter with the team ever since. So Gold Cup 2021, World Cup 2022, and he didn't play in the Gulf Cup in January, but he did play in the friendly in June. So we know he is still on the team. Almoez Ali, a definite candidate there, and Ahmed Ala El Din. Ahmed Ala El Din Abdel Motal. Well, that's a real mouthful, isn't it? I'll call him Ahmed Ala El Din because that's a bit easier to fit in the mouth. He's been with Qatar since 2013 and has 56 caps, but actually has only 3 goals, even though he is coded as a forward. And he's 30 years old. So he's been on the roster of all the tournaments since 2019, but has never been a starter. So sometimes on the bench, but usually subbing into a game or two, or several games in the Asian Cup in 2019. And he was a starter in all 5 of their games, so the 4 Gulf Cup games and the friendly. So it looks like the new manager is interested in him as a starter. So we have him as a definite candidate here. Okay, a likely candidate is Mohamed Muntari. Mohamed Muntari has been with Qatar since 2014, and he has 54 caps and 14 goals and is 29 years old, but a bit of a late arriver to the team. He's actually a naturalized Ghanaian player, the name Muntari kind of suggesting that. So a late arriver, but he was on preliminaries. Oh, no, he was a starter in 2015 Asian Cup. So my mistake there. I only said that because he wasn't selected for the 2019 Asian Cup or the Copa America. So he, I guess, made a comeback. Comeback is better than late arriver. In the 2021 Gold Cup, where he appeared in all 5 games but wasn't a starter. And in the World Cup, he was selected to the squad, but he was subbed into all 3 games. And that's kind of how I see him, as a kind of a sub coming on for the last 20 minutes or so. And he didn't play in the Gulf Cup in January 2023, but he was there for their game in June. So I'm pretty sure he will be part of the Gold Cup squad in 2023. That's Mohamed Muntari. And finally, we have Yusuf Abdurisak, who we also have as a likely candidate. So 4 forwards in the definite or likely category. And Yusuf Abdurisak has been with Qatar since 2019 and has 18 caps, but a bit of trouble scoring. He only has 1 goal, and he is 24 years old. 23 years old. I guess he hasn't had his birthday yet. He was part of the Gold Cup 2021 squad. He was on the roster, but saw no action. And although he made the 30-man training squad for the World Cup, he didn't make the final cut, so was not part of that. But more recently, he started one of their 5 games since the World Cup, and he subbed in for all others. And that's part of the reason why we have him as likely, because he was involved in both the Gulf Cup games and in the recent June friendly. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the first part, a kind of an overview of the candidates. So I'm going to see you in a month, but for you, that'll be just a couple of seconds away, where we go through the players and find out which ones actually made it to the squad. It's June, and we're back to look at Qatar's squad, what happened in the selection with the preliminary squad and the final squad. And so, welcome back if you're coming from part one, and welcome anew if you're coming in just for the short version, part two. So, for you people, I'll just explain what we did in part one. We basically made a list of candidates based mostly on players' recent participation, but also kind of on their long-term participation a little bit. And we organized them according to position and also organized them according to the likelihood of playing. So you'll see on the list definite, likely, and so on. And then today we have the rosters, so we are going to check how we did and let you know who actually made the team and then who didn't make the team, which is pretty interesting. And most media casts don't really focus on that too much. So here we go. Well, we did note that someone who didn't make the team was the manager who took them all the way to the World Cup, Felix Sanchez. But we did know this in the first part of the podcast or media cast in May, that the new manager was Carlos Queiroz. So new manager Carlos Queiroz, will consider him a, having made the squad, as it were. All right, well, for goalkeepers, we had a definite candidate in Barsha Mashil, and Barsha Mashil did make the squad. And we had a possible candidate in Saad Al-Sheeb. Now, he was the starting keeper in the World Cup, so you may be wondering, why is he just a possible candidate? That's the kind of information we gave in part one, so we kind of talked about his biographical information, but also gave the recent history. And just to let you know here, the reason is because he hadn't appeared since the 2022 World Cup. So that dropped him down to just being a possible candidate. So if you want to know all of that information, that's what we talked about in part one. And Saad Al-Sheeb is actually not selected to the squad, just to the preliminary squad there. And the other possible candidate, Yusuf Hassan, did make the final squad. We had two possible but unlikely candidates in Mahmoud Abu Nada and Shehab Alethi. Neither of those made the squad. And we had, neither of those. No, Shehab Alethi made the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. And we had a player who seemed to be off the squad, Yusuf Baliade, and he actually did make the preliminary squad there. And so we have a new player here who made the squad, and it's Salah Zakaria. So Salah Zakaria, I think we made a mistake, because I did have him on the list and I had him as a possible but unlikely player. And it seems like I just kind of overlooked him when we did the May podcast, but we'll call him new here, and I'll tell you a little bit about him. He's been with Qatar since 2022, just one cap, and he's 24 years old. And he returned after a 9-month absence into the last of their remaining games. And just that was an unofficial friendly that he played there, the last of their remaining games until the end of May. But he was a consideration for the Gold Cup squad in 2021, but didn't make the final cut. And the same is true in 2022. So Salah Zakaria, playing for Al Duhai in Qatar, finally getting his chance. Well, at least on the bench here, we guess he'll be on the bench. Okay, let's move on to defenders. And we had definite candidates in Tarek Salman and Bassam Al-Rawi. And both of those made the final squad, so a couple of veterans there. We had likely candidate Jassim Gabber, and he did make the final squad. We had possible candidate Bualam Kuki. He was a big part of the 2019 Asian Cup and a big player in their Gold Cup, in the World Cup, starting all games there. But he and a few candidates, a few veterans like him, seem to be moving out of the squad. So a bit of a surprise there that he did not make the squad, only the preliminary squad. And then we have Mohamed Imad as a possible but unlikely candidate, and he just made the preliminary squad. All right, moving on to left backs, we have Homam Ahmed as a definite candidate, and he did make the squad, the final squad. And another veteran who wasn't looking as likely to be on the squad after the World Cup. He was a starter in the World Cup, but didn't appear after the World Cup, so we put him as possible. And he didn't even make the preliminary squad. Oh my God, I haven't said his name yet. It's Abdel Karim Hassan, or Abdel Karim Hassan Fadlala. So didn't even make the preliminary squad there. So one of the veterans who are on their way out. However, the other possible candidate, Hazem Ahmed Shihata, did make the final squad. Now we move on to right backs, and we have another veteran who was a starter in the World Cup but didn't play since then. And I'm going to miss him because I like this player a lot. Pedro Miguel, or Roro, as he is sometimes known, only made the preliminary squad. But the other possible candidate we had there, Mosab Kadir, did make the final squad. We had a possible but unlikely candidate with Divab Taha, and Divab Taha did make the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. And finally, we have a player in the general defenders section. Either I neglected to introduce him in the part one of the podcast, but actually I suspect that I just didn't introduce him because he was just a possible but unlikely candidate. So maybe I didn't think it was worth it, but I should have, because he ended up making the squad, and his name is Yusuf Ayman. So we'll kind of consider him a new candidate because we hadn't introduced him in part one. And he's just been with the team since 2023, even though he's 24 years old and has played for Al Duhai since 2016. So he started when he was 17 years old, but he got his only first and only appearance in that unofficial friendly that I mentioned earlier in June 2023. Okay, so Yusuf Ayman, a bit of a surprise inclusion there, and we move on to midfielders. We begin here with a surprise too, because oh no, it's not really a surprise. Karim Budayev, well, another one of those veterans who was a starter in the World Cup. Off the team, it seems he was selected to the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. And the other possible candidate, Salam Al-Hajiri, did not even make the preliminary squad. So we go down to our possible but unlikely to find a candidate here. And we have Ahmed Fadel, or Ahmed Fadel Hassaba, who did make the final squad. And here again, too, we have another player who either I didn't consider it worth introducing, or neglected to. I don't think I neglected to, because he's right there on my list. So, but anyway, possible but unlikely candidate, Abdullah Marafi. So we'll consider him new as well. And he is new. He's been with the team since 2021, but he only has 2 caps. And he's 21 years old. No, wait, he's 31 years old. So actually quite old. He played for Al Arabi in Qatar since 2011, and he returned after a 20-month absence in June 2023. Maybe that's why he wasn't there, because he hadn't played up till May, and he just played the last of their games. So I'm going to actually put him as a new candidate because he probably wasn't on our list before. If he just came back in June. So there we go. Some surprises here. Abdullah Marafi going to be at the Cup, even though he actually maybe even seemed to be off the squad back in May. Anyway, central midfielders, we have two definite candidates, Asim Madibo, and the other definite candidate, Mohamed Wad, also making the final squad. We had likely candidate Ali Asadallah, and he also made the final squad. And then our possible candidate, Mustafa Tarek Mashal, also making the final squad. So all four of the central midfielders we had listed are going to be at the Cup. Let's move on to left midfielders, and we had possible candidate Abdulaziz Hatem, and he only made the preliminary squad, despite being a starter in the World Cup. Yet another of those veteran players, he has more than 100 caps, who hadn't played any games since the World Cup. So that seems a real watershed moment for the team, with a lot of players not selected after the World Cup. Our possible but unlikely candidate, Abdel Rahman Mustafa, not selected even for the preliminary squad. We didn't have any right midfielders, any players coded as right midfielders. So we continue on with left wingers, and there we had a likely candidate in Khalid Munir, and Khalid Munir made the final squad. The possible candidate, Ismail Mohammed, was only selected for the preliminary squad. On the right wing, we had three candidates at the possible level, and only the last of them made it. So that was Al Abdul Tamim. And sometimes his name is reversed. It's Tamim Al Abdullah or Al Abdullah Tamim. And the other two candidates, Naif Al Hadrami, only made the preliminary squad, and same with Amro Surag, just the preliminary squad there. And possible but unlikely candidate Hashim Ali also made just the preliminary squad. And we had a couple of general midfielders. They aren't coded beyond being a midfielder. And Abdullah Al-Yazidi did not make the preliminary squad, but the other one, Faisal Azadi, did make the preliminary squad. Moving on to attacking midfielders, the biggest surprise for me, but actually, again, one of those veterans who didn't play since the World Cup. I coded him as likely just because I kind of thought it was unimaginable that he wouldn't be there. But it's true, he is not there. Akram Afif not playing, so that takes a little of the sparkle off of Qatar for me. Hassan Al-Haydos also just made the preliminary squad. I felt he was kind of showing his age a little bit in recent play. So I'm less surprised with that. But he too is another one of the veterans who seems to have wrapped it up after the World Cup. He was captain of the team, actually. And we had a player who seemed to be off the squad, Abdullah Al-Arak. And it looks like we were right because he wasn't selected for the preliminary squad. But, okay. Here we do have a new candidate, and it is Mahdi Salam. And actually, he's not so much a new candidate as a replacement for a player who went home injured. So we'll meet that player soon. But Mahdi Salem was not in our list in part one of the podcast, and that's because he's brand new to the squad. He appeared only in their last two warm-up games prior to this tournament. So he has no caps for Qatar, and he's only 19 years old and plays for Al Sadd in Qatar. So Salam Mahdi, a replacement there for the injured Ala Al-Din, but we'll get back to that shortly. Okay. Moving on, we have the forwards, the actual forwards, and we don't have any secondary strikers, so the forwards. And of course, we have Almoez Ali, or Almoez Ali Abdullah, and he is selected for the final squad. And then we get to the player who I just mentioned as injured. He was a definite candidate, and he was selected, but Ahmed Ala Al-Din replaced. I'll talk a bit more about that in the injury section. We had a likely candidate in Mohamed Muntari, kind of a super sub is Mohamed Muntari, and he did make the final squad, and so did the other likely candidate, Yusuf Abdul Risak. Yusuf Abdul Risak coming to the Gold Cup. Okay, and we had a few players who were added from our list. I don't think I'll go through them because none of them are major players. They were players who seemed to be off the team. About 5 of them seemed to be well off the team and were never really kind of big players. But anyway, a bit of a surprise that they came back. There, I'm actually jumping the gun a bit by moving to the added section. So I'll just go to these summaries. Let's do a couple of summaries of the information. So we begin with notable non-selections, and we have all of those veterans. Really, the team that was groomed for the 2002 World Cup. The players that did so fabulously in the 2019 Asian Cup, and now under the new manager Carlos Queiroz, they seem to be on their way out. And in fact, most of them are in their 30s. But okay, so the first of them is goalkeeper Saad Al-Sheeb, and then central defender Boualem Kouki, and then right back Pedro Miguel, or Roro, and defensive midfielder Karim Boudayev, and Abdulaziz Hatem. Well, that's quite a list. And then the most surprising of all, Akram Afif, who actually we had considered as a likely candidate. Most of the others we had as possible because they hadn't shown up since the World Cup. Well, that's true of Akram Afif, but we kind of had higher expectations for him. Another one with Hassan Al-Haydos, and finally, no, that's it, because Ala Al-Din is actually injured. Okay, so surprise inclusions. Well, we had a couple of new players there. Not new because they were on our list, but I hadn't introduced them for one reason or another. But anyway, goalkeeper Salah Zakaria. On our list, he was considered possible but unlikely, but he did make the squad. And we have Yusuf Ayman, also possible but unlikely. Ahmed Fadel, the defensive midfielder. We had him as possible but unlikely. And finally, Abdullah Marafi. All of those players we had labeled as possible but unlikely, but how miserably wrong we were because they made the final squad. Okay, and another new player is Mahdi Salem, and he comes in as a replacement for the injury that we'll talk about right away here. And then I mentioned the the 4 or 5 kind of players added to the preliminary squad that kind of came back in from the cold. They hadn't been with the team for a long time, but we decided not to mention them. And then in addition, there were about 10 players who were not even on our radar, so brand new names to us. And I won't go through those names because most of them don't have a cap, or they maybe played one friendly, so they're maybe up and comers for the team, and we'll mention them. And actually, one of them was Mahdi Salim. So if they take on any kind of a bigger role, we'll bring them into the picture. But anyway, quite a few new players introduced, I suppose, replacing those veterans who are on their way out. All right, and we end with injuries. We only have one for Qatar, and that is Ahmed Ala Eldin. Ahmed Ala Eldin, selected for the final squad but replaced. He actually was not listed as injured on a couple of websites that I checked, and there's no record of it in his club matches, although his club season seemed to wrap up kind of early in May. But he was removed from the squad very recently, so perhaps in a friendly he got injured, or sometimes in these cases they just say it's an injury and there really is some other reason. But so not coded as injured, but said to be injured, Ahmed Ala Eldin, and replaced by Mahdi Salam. And that's it. That is the team for Qatar.